Hey, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Utah County Republican Party podcast. I'm your host and the party vice chair, Charles Max Wood, and I am here with Rachel Terry. Now, Rachel is running for Attorney General. She and Frank Mylar were advanced out of the convention, and we are happy to have her here. Rachel, really quickly, as we dive in, if people have never heard of you before, what are the things that people really need to know about you?
Well, thank you for having me on. Like you said, I'm Rachel Terry, and I'm running for Attorney General. And what I want people to know most is that I'm qualified, I'm honest, I'm respected, and I'm ready to work. I've been a practicing attorney for 20 years. I spent the first 8 years in private practice at a firm in Salt Lake called Fabian Vancott. I spent 2 years working for the Board of Education, and then I spent 7 years in the Attorney General's office litigating some of the most significant cases in our state's history. A lot of high-profile cases, a lot of difficult, sad, complex constitutional cases for universities, school districts, and state agencies. And now I'm the director of an agency called Risk Management. Risk Management is the insurance for the state. We have a large team, 35 employees. I oversee the work of 40 legal professionals, and I love this work. I love what the Attorney General's office does. I work with them every day. I no longer work for them. Now they are an important partner in the work that I do. I've been involved in litigation and legislation, budgeting, management, and policy, and I love this work. I want the Attorney General's office to be what it's supposed to be, which is the office, the legal office for the people, and to advocate and fight for the state of Utah every day, and that's what I'm committed to doing.
Awesome. So let's say that we wake up, in the middle of November, and it's Rachel Terry, right? She's our new AG. Yay! So,
Yay!
You get in, and what are you going to do, right?
Well,
what are your priorities?
There are two big priorities for me. The one is internal and one is external. So I'll talk about internal first, and that's increasing and improving the trust and relationship between the Attorney General's office, and the public. So I get asked this all the time. Why am I different? What will be different in my administration from previous administrations?
Right.
And what I say to them and what I'm committed to doing is being transparent, accessible, and accountable to the people. Now, all those words mean nothing without action. So let me tell you what that means. It means having a constituent services office, because people need to be able to tell us how we're doing, and they need to be able to ask questions. And right now, if you were to call the office, you'll get shuffled around to a couple of people. You may or may not get any real clear answers or support. So my top priority internally is to make sure that we have the resources available to respond to the public, to answer their questions, and to connect them to resources if they need it. Externally, my number one priority is fighting federal overreach, specifically in public lands, in education, and in energy policy. And what that means is mostly litigation. That's the way you fight the federal government when you're the Attorney General. And in our public land space, I live in Davis County. We don't have the kind of public lands issues that Central and Southern Utah do,
right?
But they still impact Davis County, even if we don't realize it. There are BLM rules and other federal rules that are currently being proposed that will limit access to public land for agriculture and recreation. And if those go through, if we're unsuccessful in fighting them, then we're going to lose a significant agricultural resource. And I also, like in the San Rafael Swell, they're trying to keep people out of that. Like these are treasures that we have taken care of for a long time. There's Arch Canyon, which I've been on our Razor. We love that. That's in San Juan. They're trying to shut that down.
Right.
It is what the federal government is trying to do to our economy is unacceptable. Utahns know how to manage their lands. In education, the Biden administration just recently came out with entirely new regulations for Title IX, which completely undermine and gut the original intent of Title IX, which in 1972 when it was passed was to protect women and girls and give them opportunities in education, and athletics. And now that's completely changed. And then in energy, finally, and to finish that off, other states are filing lawsuits to challenge those regulations, and I will challenge those as well. And then finally, in energy policy, having access to develop energy resources. So Utah is not only energy independent as well as
Hmm.
agriculturally independent, but can actually continue to be the economic engine for our state. We talk a lot about technology, but our extraction industry, our energy industry really is vital to the success of the state of Utah. And I am committed to fighting for those all day, every day. And if I might monologue for one more minute,
Yeah.
the one other thing that really matters to me is protecting children. The Attorney General's office does several things that are really important to protecting children. And I have 13-year-old boy-girl twins, so these are particularly
Hmm.
near and dear to my heart. The social media companies, we know for a fact that they are causing harm to our teens, and they
Yep.
are impacting them dramatically. And the state, the legislature, the governor, and the Attorney General's office has made that a priority. I will continue to make it a priority to fight those, but not only in the social media space, but also when we talk about internet crimes against children. That's an important task force in the office that um, identifies and prosecutes child predators online. And then one other thing I want to highlight is the work of our Children's Justice Center. Those are resources to interview children who have been victims of crime. And those are a really important resource because law enforcement relies on those. Interviewing kids is a very specific skill to make
Right.
sure not only you don't cause additional harm to the child, but also to preserve their testimony in a way that it'll be admissible in court. And focusing on these resources in the Attorney General's office is a top priority to me.
Yep, I hear you. And just to kind of talk through some of these. So you mentioned the San Rafael Swell, and that's actually where my wife grew up, is down there in Emery County.
Oh,
And
I love Emory.
yeah, it's funny because yeah, you're talking about access to those lands, and like everybody goes out to the desert, right, to camp. It's Easter. Let's go out to the desert to camp. It's National Peanut Butter and Jelly Day. Let's all go out to right. That's what they
Exactly.
do, right? And
That's what they
so
do.
yeah, and so it makes a ton of sense. It's like, well, yeah, and you're not hurting the desert. It's a
No,
great place to be. So yeah, I feel that. Um, you talked a lot about the energy policy, and yeah, I mean, I remember the legislature passing a bill that basically said you can't shut down our power plant, right?
that's
It's
right.
like,
That's right.
you know, I mean, this is an ongoing fight. The girls stuff. I mean, so I have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old daughter. I also have a couple of sons, and I have an 8-year-old daughter. And yeah, I mean, I keep talking to people about this, and some people just argue till they're blue in the face. No, if they feel like a girl, they should be able to go in the girls' bathroom. And I'm like, dude, if my daughter's in there and there's one dude in there, there's soon to be two dudes in there, and then the one dude is going to drag the other dude out because it's just not right. And
Yeah,
it's yeah, I mean, all of these things, and yes, we need somebody in there to go fight these battles for us. And then finally, anything that involves kids. If you're messing with kids, there is nothing there's no punishment that's too harsh.
I
So
agree.
so yeah.
I agree.
So yeah,
These
so
are,
I love this.
yeah, they're really important to me. And the I've spent a lot of time over the last 4 months getting to know the different parts of the state. And I want to highlight that's one of the reasons I had such a positive experience with the caucus convention system. There, people have a lot to say about it, but I'll say this: what it did for me as a candidate is it really gave me a platform to not only share my message with people, but also to hear from people. Because the way you
Yep.
campaign through caucus convention is very personal. And I had over 150 events that I attended or hosted myself
Oh wow.
from January 4th until April 27th. And it was a lot. And I was really tired by the time I got to the convention. But it was a way for me to actually connect on my messaging with individuals and more importantly, to hear what matters to them. And over and over, what I heard was they want someone they trust. They
Hmm.
want someone who will fight for them. And they want
Yep.
someone who will apply conservative principles. And I'm committed to all three of those because an attorney general is only as effective as a relationship the attorney general has with the public, with the legislature, with the governor's office. And one thing that's unique to me is I have been in these spaces for a long time. Now, some would say, oh, Rachel, you're just an insider. No. Uh, I have worked with schools and universities and advocating for them, but in also giving them training and telling them what they need to do differently. I've worked on legislation to promote and to promote safety for kids and in law enforcement. And the attorney general isn't just someone who goes to court. And if you don't mind, I'd actually like to share what the attorney general's office does a little more.
Yeah, I was going to ask, so go ahead.
Yeah, it's a mystery to a lot of people. And as someone who worked there for 7 years and who engages with them every single day as part of my current role, I have a very good understanding of what's happening.
Right.
So there's 550 employees of the Attorney General's office. It's the state's largest law firm. It's huge. And anything that touches the law in the state of Utah, the Attorney General's office is involved with. We talked about the San Rafael swell and the stuff happening, trying to shut down these grazing permits. The Attorney General's office is involved. We represent the Department of Natural, all the state departments, like the Department of Natural Resources and Corrections. We also have attorneys assigned to the universities. We have a litigation division that just handles lawsuits against the state and universities and school districts. And then we also have the criminal side of the office. It's about 1/4 of the office is dedicated to criminal prosecutions. A lot of it is Medicaid fraud, public corruption, that's separated out for the office. And their job on the criminal side is to go after the bad guys. Right. And also to support, and it's not just doing all the criminal work. Most of the criminal prosecutions actually happen at the county level. So homicides, drug charges, when they're appealed, they come to the Attorney General's office. So, and then another thing we do with the Attorney General's office is legislation. Any legislation that's going to impact our clients, so the states and school districts and universities, in any kind of matter, the Attorney General's office is working on and guiding to make sure that it really serves the purposes that the legislators are trying to promote. And that's why it's so important to have an Attorney General who not only understands the law and has actually practiced law, which I have, defended many, many big complicated public cases, but who also understands these other spaces, knows how. I'm the only candidate who has worked directly with educational institutions, higher ed and K through 12, and knows and understands that law. I'm the only Attorney General who has worked on law enforcement legislation while also working with and representing law enforcement entities. These are spaces I've been in and want to keep working in. Because it's what I love. You work the hardest on the things you love, and this is the work that I love. I spent the first decade of my career in private practice, and I really enjoyed it. Did mining cases and banking and all of that. Right. But serving the public is where my heart is, and this is what I want to do.
Awesome. So I want to go back to something else you said, and this is kind of a hot button for me, but I feel like I hear this from some of the other folks, and that is before I get to this question, let me talk about something else. So you mentioned going through the caucus convention system, and I have to say I've actually been through it twice myself as a candidate. And you mentioned that it's kind of this one-on-one experience, and that's so true. You get these people that really care, that really understand what's going on, that want to know what's what is involved. And I keep talking to people. It's like, what else would you have us do? Because the other option is we all watch our TVs, and when the ad comes up, I like that guy, right? But instead, we have these informed people go out and do the work and get to know the candidates. And anyway, so if you come through the convention, you've been vetted by a bunch of people, and to me, that adds a ton of legitimacy to you and to Frank and, to anybody else who went through the process. Right. And just to have that and say, okay, look, I convinced, I don't remember what percentage you got, but 40 plus
40.24%. Yes.
Right. So you convinced 40.24% of about 4,000 delegates that you were the right person for this job, right?
That's right.
And I mean that's something, and these aren't slouches. These are people that really care, went and figured it out, and came and voted for you. And so,
Yes.
when
Yeah,
it
they
gets
really
right down
put
to
me Yeah, and they
yeah,
really put me through my paces. I mean, I had, I approached campaigning a little differently. I was regularly told, like, oh, you're not like a regular politician. I'd say, it's because I'm not. I'm a
mhm,
lawyer, and I approached my campaigning very much like I was trying to win a case. And
right,
so when I had Zoom calls, people asked me every question. I had it visible to everybody, and I just answered the questions, the hard ones, the sticky ones, and people really put me through my paces. They wanted to know things about me, and not everybody. Obviously, there were 59.76% that
mhm,
didn't agree with my positions, but they knew my positions because they got to ask me. They called me on the phone. They sent me emails. They came on my Zoom meetings. We had very personal dialogue, and they were truly engaged. And you point out something that when you just have a direct primary, it's just whose commercial do I like?
mhm,
It's not personal. It's not the same kind of town halls. It's not the same kind of
right,
engaged experience because you're campaigning to 1 million people instead of 4,000. And
mhm.
and I think there's room for improvement in the caucus convention
Oh,
system,
sure.
but being able to engage with people so personally and people who really care and wanted to know exactly where I stood on issues, I think was very meaningful and valuable, and I want to continue to support that.
Right. Well, I appreciate that because, yeah, I just can't think of a better. I mean, we could improve the system, but I just can't think of a better way to do it. Um,
Yeah.
as we kind of get in, another thing that you said was that you're going to fight for conservative values, and it seems like at the conventions everybody gets up and says, "I'm a conservative and
Yeah.
I'll fight for conservative values." So what does that mean to you?
Yeah. Everyone does say that. And, so I'm glad you asked because it does mean something very specific to me. Conservative values to me are, and maybe it sounds like it should be on a vinyl lettering on my doorway, but it's faith, family, and country, right?
Huh?
Uh, and that is what it is. But as you actually apply it, it is being fiscally conservative, which I have been as someone who works for the state, and I have a budget of about $200 million. I look every single day to see how I can cut down on my costs because I know that you and me, everyone are paying are paying for those costs. It's being pro-life, which I am, pro Second Amendment, which I am. It's I feel very strongly in limited government, and I also believe that the government closest to the people governs best. And so, really, those are the conservative values that I'm talking about. And being pro family can mean a lot of things. For me, it means these things we've already talked about, where in education, in energy, in public lands, because all of those are going to impact our families. And making sure that Utah is a place that supports family values, supports parental voices in education, supports and options there that make sure that we are keeping our taxes low because that's impacts your ability to succeed as a family is how much the government is not only telling you what to do but how much it's going to cost you, and those are the things that I'm passionate about that overlap with what I can do as your attorney general.
Awesome. So the follow-up question, and for me, I'm just going to back up because this is a point that I make when I'm teaching people how to podcast. Is I'm like, look, you can have a mic, you can have all the things, but podcasting is storytelling. So I want some stories, right? Let's hear some more stories. What are some examples of where you've actually come in and fought for some of these values?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned this before where it comes to being fiscally conservative. I came into this role about a year and a half ago, and I spent the first 6 months evaluating every single program that we offer, the performance of every employee, looking at every single case that we're litigating. And I found a lot of areas for improvement.
This is
And
the risk
in
management role,
this
right?
is risk manager,
Okay.
yes, which is the coolest job. I love it. We have the best stories, and I could talk about those all day, but that's not what they're here to listen to, or maybe they are. They're really great stories. But is I worked on in that role. I have been able to save the state in my first year $5 million and set up a new program to save tens of $1 millions moving forward.
Mhm.
Also, on the specific cases that I've worked on, and I've worked on a lot of Title IX cases and provided a lot of Title IX training. And just to remind people, Title IX, the statute itself says uh, prohibits discrimination on the basis of sex in educational uh, programs.
Okay.
And so that's all the statute says. That's it. But then there are federal regulations, and then there's letters interpreting the regulations that interpret the statute, and then there are cases that interpret the letters that interpret the regs that interpret the
Right.
statute. So as I've actually worked in these spaces, Title IX had its importance and implications for education and families has grown dramatically over the last 10 years because the federal government has used it in different ways,
Mhm.
starting with the Obama administration, uh, and then again now in the Biden administration has really made massive pivots in how it's used. And so I've actually worked on these cases. And then as I work with schools and universities, I advocate, promote making sure that parents' voices matter in these cases. Like, sometimes it's hard to be um, it's hard to be in education because there are a lot of angry people and there's a lot of people wanting to do different things.
Mhm.
But at the same time, helping K through 12 especially work with parents, support parents, and hear their voices matters to me, not only because it reduces risk and lawsuits, but because it's the right thing to do. And my philosophy in representing the state is when the government is wrong, we admit that we're wrong and we fix it. And when we're right, we fight. And specifically, areas where I think we fight is this federal overreach. We're seeing it now in a specific case where the Department of Justice is trying to tell the Department of Corrections how to navigate transgender inmates. But it's
Oh
being done in a
gosh.
way, yeah, it's gonna be hot, and it's gonna be a difficult case because the federal government wants to promote a narrative that's inconsistent with actually what's safest and
Mhm.
best for our corrections community. They just want to throw out, some what I think is liberal nonsense in these spaces. I think, and I want to go back to something we talked about these transgender issues. I I do and will promote treating every single person with respect,
Right.
everyone, no matter whatever your gender identity, your political identity, whatever it is about you, every person deserves to be treated with respect.
Mhm.
But you can also fight for your values while treating others with respect.
Right.
And for me, applying these conservative values that protect girls and women in these spaces, that is about fiscal conservancy, about being pro-life, and those are the values that I'll apply.
Yep, absolutely. I'm with you there. It's funny too because they kind of make it out that you're like horrendously mean to these people if you don't agree with their lifestyle, and the reality is it's like, no, in fact, I have a certain level of compassion for you if you feel like you're grown up in the wrong body, but not with my girls. Right.
Yeah, that's right. Well, and I think this dovetails with the immigration issue too,
Yeah.
um, because one of the things that I've come to really understand and appreciate in learning more and more about this immigration crisis is it's not humane to keep the border
Mhm.
open. We're allowing cartels to treat people like chattel, like property, because they're
Right.
charging every person that they're bringing across the border, and they don't care what happens to them. They don't care what's next. They don't care if they ultimately, if they're bringing children across the border who don't have parents, these kids are going to be
Yeah.
exploited. And leaving the border open, not enforcing our laws, is inhumane. And one of the stories I want to share with is a sheriff. I'm endorsed by sheriffs across the state,
Hmm.
and I've been talking to them about how immigration has impacted their work, and it's had a dramatic impact. And
Oh, absolutely.
one story in particular that struck home to me. There are two, and so let's do a little bit of story time.
Yeah.
There are two particular stories that have really impacted me. One is in a rural county. The sheriff was telling me that they've had a massive influx of immigrants who are not there legally. They are not living. They are not living a comfortable life. They are living in sheds. And they have inadequate water and electricity. And there are instances of abuse, not only in their employment, but also domestic violence.
Hmm.
But they won't report it because they feel unsafe. And they're also being told that if they go to law enforcement, that their families at home, in the countries
Hmm.
where they came from, will be hurt by the cartels. So they're just suffering. And it is not humane to let a system exploit people like that. And it's not
Right.
humane to have such an influx that it's creating a massive impact on our educational system. That rural school district doesn't have the resources to all of a sudden have 50 kids who don't speak English and trying
Right.
to navigate that. That's not a slow buildup. It's a jump, and
Hmm.
that's had an impact on the schools. It has an impact on the kids who have been there already. It's having
Right.
an impact on those immigrant families in a way that is not humane. The second story that really hit home to me was it was my very first campaign event, and a gentleman was asking me about my views on immigration policy, and I was
Hmm.
still learning and diving in, and he didn't feel like I'd come out strong enough, and we talked about it, and I understood now why, and he helped me understand why. His daughter was killed in a DUI by a drunk driver. And it was a person who was in the United States illegally, had previously been detained for DUI, was never deported, and she was killed while her husband was in the UK waiting on his green papers. So he was trying to follow the law
Oh gosh.
to come to the country,
Uh-huh.
while a person who didn't follow the law killed her. And that has really that has sat with me.
Hmm.
This is not just some vague story on the news. This is impacting real people in real ways. And and that's why working on immigration with Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, who has endorsed me in this race,
Hmm.
is also very, very important to me, because I see the personal effects of these poor policies.
Right. And I think I think so many times we kind of miss that, right? We kind of see the, kind of the broader impacts and not recognize that, yeah, one, it impacts the people coming across the border, and it also impacts the people in the communities that they end up in. I guess the question that I have on this particular issue is, since a lot of the immigration stuff is kind of at the federal level, what can you actually do about it as an attorney general?
Yeah, that's a good question. I can't solve it alone, because immigration is regulated by the federal government,
Right.
and they're not doing their job. So we have some tools.
You
They're
can
not
just say
doing.
that on a loop, right?
Yeah, federal government not doing its job. But they sure are working hard to shut down our lands. Oh, just not the
Right.
border. So they want to shut down the San Rafael swell grazing
Right.
and recreation in Utah, but they don't
Right.
want to close down the borders. So
Well,
that's
and getting down to
nonsensical.
this impacts real people. Go talk to those farmers. I mean,
Oh
what else
yeah.
are they going to do?
What else are they going
Anyway.
to do? Oh yeah, it's crazy. So what can I do as the attorney general on these immigration issues? Well, again, my job as your attorney general will be to handle this through negotiations, and when those fail, litigation. And that is the tool in my toolbox: is litigate, litigate, litigate. Lawsuits are the way. When all else fails, we go to the
Mhm.
courts. And I will join with Texas in their fight against the federal government to protect the border. They are in a variety of lawsuits that have to deal with what their ability is to
Right.
secure the border. And I will stand with Texas all day, every day in securing the border, because when they are successful, we will be successful. They protect us by protecting the border. And the same being true with Arizona, Nevada, California. I don't know. They're just going to leave it open, I guess,
Right.
forever. And it is through litigation. It is by bringing to bear the power of the judicial branch, and that's something that I've have a lot of experience in. I have worked on um, massive Channel 9 cases, $1 billion trade secret case. The first big case I got my experience in was working on the Crandall Canyon mine case from when that mine collapsed in 2007. So I've been in these spaces where I've seen how you navigate and negotiate big, complex cases, and that matters. While small correctional cases are helpful too in building experience. For an attorney general, the best experience is someone who has worked on the big issues that bring in policy, that bring in legislation, that require collaboration and coordination with a variety of stakeholders. That's what I've been doing for a decade, is really building those coalitions. And I do it every day in my current role, and I'll continue to do that as your attorney general.
Awesome. I'm trying to think what else we need to go over. I guess. Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, the question people often ask me is, why? Why are you running for attorney general? Uh, I'll tell you
Okay,
the
I want a story here, right? I don't want to. Oh, I woke up and I
yeah.
decided I should be attorney general, right? What made that decision for you?
Yeah, and that's the real question here, right? I'll tell you the funny story that I joke about, and then I'll tell you the real one. Uh, so when Sean Reyes decided not to run, I went to my husband. I said, "Hey, what if I apply for this super cool job that pays exactly what I make right now? It will cost us money to get the job, and then during the process of applying and afterwards, people will be really mean to us." And he said, "That sounds awesome. Let's do that." And actually,
Oh,
all of this has been very true. People have been very nice, but also a lot of people are not very nice. That's just the nature of politics.
yeah.
So this is like I started in private practice. Uh, it was a financially better fit, but it wasn't where my heart was. I've always been
Right.
interested in sort of the bigger, greater good. And so when Sean Ray said he wasn't going to run, I'd been thinking about it for years, but there was another person who I was also going to support. A good friend, Melissa Holyoke, was thinking about running, and she was our Solicitor General, and I would have been behind her 100%.
Right.
She decided to pursue being a federal trade commissioner, and she was recently not appointed, and she's doing great work. So when she decided not to go for it, I thought long and hard about it. And really, I know it's very Pollyanna, and everyone will say this, but as I looked around at the field of people who were jumping into the race, I didn't I didn't say like, oh, I'm running against them.
Mm-hmm.
I ran for the office because I
Right.
love it. Like in the work that I'm doing now, I've been able to do a lot of good for the state, not just in cutting the budget, but actually developing programs that make the state safer and better. And I wanted to scale up that good. I really believe that I can do the most good in the role as Attorney General. It's what I want to do. It's where my heart is. I love the work of the Attorney General's office. I love the people in the office. I love the people that we serve. And I love that as your Attorney General, I really can make the state better and safer and more prosperous. It's where my heart is. It's where it's always been. You can tell that that's true because I left a job that paid much better a decade ago, and I've put in the time and attention to really focusing on representing and working hard for the state of Utah. It's what I love. It's what I want to do, and making sure that there is a relationship of trust because it matters for the success of the state. And the tagline I played with is I want to make the attorney general boring again. Uh, it plays in some places and not in others. It's It's I really believe that the attorney general, and this is how I will be, should be focused on the work and
Mhm.
solely on the work, no extracurriculars, nothing else. That's how I will run the office. Is I want to be the attorney general, not the politician general, and that's what I'm going to do.
Right. So I've got two more questions that kind of came to mind. One is, first, I've been hearing rumors that a bill is going to be brought forward, or an amendment, I guess, to the state constitution is going to be brought forward that moves the attorney general under the governor.
Yes, that
How
has
do you
been
feel about that?
proposed. I think it's a terrible idea, and I would oppose it. Whether I'm the attorney general or not, I will oppose it. And here's why. Um, the Constitution was designed to give the Attorney General autonomy and
Mhm.
independence. And that independence is incredibly important because one of the things the Attorney General's office does is investigate and prosecute public corruption. And having the pressures from the governor, a governor or the legislature in deciding what to prosecute and not prosecute would not be good for addressing public
Mhm.
corruption. And the other reason is it's so important that the people get to have a say
Yep.
in who their attorney is. You know, if you're going out and hiring an attorney, you want to be able to vet your own attorney. And that's what this is. This is a vetting process. This is a hiring process for a real job that requires technical skills. This isn't, to be a legislator, you don't need to have specific technical skills, but to be an attorney general, you need to be an attorney.
Mhm.
You need to be someone who knows how to navigate cases and political issues, and giving the people that say. And then not only to hire, but to fire. And
Right.
if I do a bad job, if I don't keep my promises, you should fire me. And that's why keeping this as an independently elected office is so important.
Yeah, I think case in point on this one is the Attorney General of the United States, right? Especially the one that we have currently, right? Where you get any pushback from Congress, and then you hear, well, who's supposed to enforce that? Oh, well, this is the
Mhm.
Attorney General's office. Well, but it didn't go the administration's way, so of course that's never ever going to happen. And that kind of autonomy to me is critical, right? It's like, look, no matter who it is, no matter how politically unsavory it is, no matter whether they're a political ally or not, you have to be independent to be able to evaluate that stuff and go, you know what? I like the guy, but he's wrong here, right?
Yep,
Or I like the gal and she's wrong here, right? And to make that call, and also no matter how far up or down the chain they are. And so, yeah, I
that's
really
right.
feel this one strongly. You've got to be able to do your job without political interference from someone else in the governor's office.
That's right. And it's so important. The work that's happening in the Attorney General's office often can be political and unpopular. And that independence is needed to make sure that we are applying the rule of law
Yep.
uh, outside of political interference. And that's how I've operated when I was representing the state, and as I do it now. And we'll keep doing that as your Attorney General.
Right. So the second question I have, and this kind of dovetails off of what you said as far as like the people have the right to hire their attorney, right? So you're, as attorney general, you would be our attorney, right? And in
That's
a
right.
lot of ways, it feels like if you're not paying attention, or if you just kind of, casually follow along, it looks like the attorney general is the state's attorney, right? And you are that as well as the attorney general, right? But a lot of the issues that we've talked about as far as like public lands and things like that, a lot of that feels like, okay, so, let's say we win some landmark case and we get all of the public land given back to the state the way that we want, right? A lot of that will benefit us, but it's all going to be managed through the state. So that feels a little bit disconnected from me, right? The
Right.
Title IX cases feel a little bit more at home, right? Because I have kids that I'm concerned about going to school and having these issues, or going to the grocery store and having these issues, or whatever.
Right.
But the thing that I see some of the attorney generals really fighting back on come more down to just defending our rights, right? So it's not this issue on, some regulation like Title IX. It's, you see attorney generals going out and fighting to fight censorship on social media platforms, or they're going out and they're defending people on their right to have and bear arms, or they're going out and they're fighting to, say, hey, look, the federal government can't just come in and, oops, well, we kind of sort of didn't have a warrant, but we wanted to know, and so we've been spying on them for years, right? And so what do you do there? Like, how would you approach that as an attorney general?
Yeah, that's a really great question, and I'm glad you asked because yes, the Attorney General's office is there to represent and defend the state, but it's all supposed to be with an eye towards how's it benefiting individual Utahns. And so to share another story, I think about some ranching families that I've been talking
Mm-hmm.
to in Garfield County. And when you fight those regulations, you're actually fighting for those families to have access to the lands, to access to the grazing permits that they've been relying on, and making sure that they are providing not only an economic and agricultural resource to all of us. So when you fight on these lands issues, you're fighting for individual
Mm-hmm.
families, and you're fighting for citizens across the state of Utah. When you fight these immigration issues, you're really fighting for individuals across the state of Utah. And it's not just about representing state bureaucracies.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not helpful to us. When those are not helpful to us, then we need to revisit them, take them down, and make sure that they're applying the law too. And that's another way that as your Attorney General, I will fight for individual citizens, is that the Attorney General's office represents every state agency. We provide the legal counsel. And when they're not following the law, it's our job to get them in line because we're their attorneys. And that's another reason why having this constituent services office is so important. Is just like I got a lot of feedback during the caucus convention process, I want a lot of feedback from people as the Attorney General to make sure that I'm not missing these issues that are impacting individual lives.
Awesome. All right. Well, is there anything else that you want people to know about?
That I'm ready to work and that I'll work for them. Like I'm in it for the work. I will apply these conservative principles to the law, the rule of law, and making sure that I fight for Utahns all day, every day. And I'm ready to start on day one. I won't need training wheels. I'm ready to go.
All right. So then the last question, and this is the one. I mean, I've been a candidate. I definitely feel
Yeah.
this. One of the hardest things is just getting the word out, right? So
Yes.
if people want to help your campaign, put yard signs up, go knock on doors, donate money, any other thing that you need. How do they find you? How do they say, "Hey, let me help"?
Oh, thank you for asking that because you're right. I need a lot of help. I'm a grassroots campaign of all volunteers, and I would very much welcome every donation, whether it's big or small, and every volunteer matters. And you can go to Rachel for Utah, RACHEL Utah.com. You can sign up to volunteer, donate, or just put up a sign, and we'll mail you a sign. And I'd be grateful for anyone and everyone's support as we get the word out. Ballots drop in about 10 days, and the primary is on the 25th. And I hope to be your Republican nominee.
All right. Very good. I am going to just pop up that URL here real quick so people can see it. Um,
Thank
so,
you. Thank you. That's it.
all right. Well, thanks for coming and talking to us. Hopefully, this helps some people make some decisions in the primary. And, as we go on to the general, that too. So, thanks for coming, Rachel. This was a lot of fun and very educational.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate you hosting this podcast and having me on with you today. Really appreciate it. It's a great public service.